The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the downtown bus terminal like bullets from an angry sky. I stood there in my soaked wedding anniversary dress, mascara running down my cheeks, watching Daniel's Mercedes disappear into the storm. His final words echoed in my mind. Maybe spending the night here will teach you some appreciation for what you have. What Daniel didn't know was that I'd been planning this exact moment for 6 months. The waterproof envelope hidden in my purse contained everything I needed to disappear forever. As lightning illuminated the empty terminal around me, I wasn't thinking about the humiliation he intended. I was thinking about the private jet that would be waiting for me in Phoenix tomorrow morning. Let me take you back to how it all began. Because what Daniel thought was my moment of defeat was actually the beginning of his. Mia beta hinda mayehia. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. It was March 15th, and I had just turned 29. The storm had been building all evening, one of those violent spring thunderstorms that tear through Dallas like nature's own fury. I was standing in the Greyhound terminal on South Lamar Street, completely drenched, my silver anniversary dress clinging to my skin like a second layer of disappointment. But I wasn't crying, I was calculating. Joe and Daniel had left me there as punishment, or so he believed. Earlier that evening, we'd been at his parents' house in Highland Park for what was supposed to be our 5th wedding anniversary dinner. Patricia Sullivan, a woman who had despised me for her life's work since the day Daniel brought me home, had spent the entire meal cataloging my failures as a wife. Jessica doesn't understand the sacrifices Daniel makes, she'd said, cutting into her prime rib with surgical precision. She just sits in that house all day, playing with her little computer projects, while my son works 18-hour days building his practice. My little computer projects. As if the software development work that had been quietly generating 6-figure contracts for the past 2 years was some kind of adorable hobby. As if the financial planning I'd been doing hadn't saved us from bankruptcy when Daniel's dental practice hit rough waters 18 months ago. As if my careful budgeting wasn't the only reason Daniel could afford his weekend golf trips and expensive wine collection. Mother's absolutely right, Daniel had said, not even looking at me as he reached for his 3rd glass of wine. You need to start showing more gratitude for the life I've provided, the life he'd provided, the life where I managed every household expense, coordinated every social obligation, and somehow remained completely invisible while doing it all. The life where his golf buddies, Marcus Thompson and Ryan Davis, treated me like their personal tech support whenever their computers had problems. The life where his sister Amanda openly discussed how disappointed she was that Daniel hadn't married Claire Martinez, the surgeon's daughter who'd moved to Seattle. I smiled and nodded through dinner, just as I'd been doing for years. But inside, I was watching the final pieces of a plan fall into place. A plan that had been 6 months in the making. Just as why the storm outside Patricia's house had been perfect cover for what came next. Daniel had been drinking heavily, his usual response to his mother's passive-aggressive commentary about everything from my career to my failure to produce grandchildren. When it was time to leave, he was belligerent and looking for a fight. You embarrassed me tonight, he'd slurred as we drove through the torrential rain. Sitting there like a statue while my mother tried to help you understand what being a wife actually means. Help me understand. As if being systematically criticized and diminished was somehow educational. I'm sorry you feel that way, I'd replied calmly, watching the windshield wipers struggle against the downpour. Sorry I feel that way? His voice had risen to that dangerous pitch I knew so well. You should be sorry for being so ungrateful. You know what? Maybe you need to learn some humility. That's when he'd pulled into the bus terminal parking lot. The Greyhound station on South Lamar, where buses stopped running after 10 p.m. It was nearly midnight. Get out, he'd said, his eyes glittering with cruel satisfaction. Walk home. Maybe the exercise will help you think about how good you have it. 18 miles in a thunderstorm, in heels and a cocktail dress. It was supposed to be my humiliation, my breaking point, the moment that would finally make me grateful for his protection and provision. Instead, it was my liberation. Because here's what Daniel didn't know. I had been planning my escape for 6 months, not just from our marriage, though that was certainly part of it, but from the entire life that had slowly suffocated my ambitions and potential. 6 months earlier, I'd made a discovery that changed everything. Daniel had left his laptop open on our kitchen island while he went to shower after a particularly frustrating day at the dental practice. His Gmail account was logged in, displaying an email thread that would shatter any remaining illusions I had about our marriage. The subject line read, "The Jessica Problem Family Strategy Meeting." My hands had frozen over the keyboard. I should have closed it, walked away, preserved whatever dignity remained in our relationship. Instead, I clicked. The email was from Patricia Sullivan to her inner circle, Daniel, his sister Amanda, and his closest friends Marcus and Ryan. What I read in those messages made my stomach clench with a mixture of rage and crystalline clarity and hystero. "She's getting too independent," Patricia had written. "This programming work is making her think she doesn't need Daniel. We need to address this before she gets any ideas about leaving." Amanda had responded with surgical precision. "I agree. Daniel needs to be firmer about the work situation. No wife of a Sullivan man should be running around playing tech entrepreneur. It reflects poorly on the family image." But it was Marcus's contribution that truly opened my eyes. My wife Sarah used to have career ambitions too. I convinced her that supporting me was more fulfilling than chasing her own dreams. Now she's perfectly content managing our household and helping with my real estate business. Daniel just needs to be more assertive. Ryan had added his own wisdom. "The key is making her feel like giving up work is her choice. Create enough obstacles, enough family pressure, enough scheduling conflicts that she'll eventually quit on her own. Then she'll never resent you for making her stop." Daniel's response had been the final nail in the coffin. "You're all right. I've been too accommodating. Time to remind Jessica where her priorities should be. The anniversary dinner at Mom's will be perfect timing. Jessica always gets emotional about family milestones." They had been planning to break me. Systematically, methodically, with the cold efficiency of people who saw me not as a person with dreams and ambitions, but as a problem to be solved. Once I started looking, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every family gathering where I'd been subtly criticized, every suggestion that my work was taking time away from Daniel, every casual comment about how successful wives supported their husbands' careers rather than pursuing their own. It hadn't been accidental, it had been coordinated. I scrolled through months of emails, each one revealing another layer of manipulation. They discussed my schedule, my client meetings, and my income. Information Daniel had been gathering and sharing with his family like intelligence reports. "Jessica made $15,000 last month," one email read. "That's more than Daniel's practice netted after expenses. She's getting too confident." Too confident. As if confidence in a wife was something dangerous, something to be managed and contained. I found detailed plans for undermining my work. Patricia scheduling family emergencies during my important client presentations. Amanda called with urgent needs right before my project deadlines. Daniel picking fights the night before big meetings, ensuring I'd be emotionally drained and off my game. They'd been sabotaging me for over a year, and I'd been too trusting, too focused on keeping peace, to see it. But their emails revealed something else. Something they didn't fully understand. The true state of Daniel's dental practice. While they'd been focused on diminishing my income, they'd been ignoring how much we actually needed it. Sullivan Family Dentistry was failing. Daniel had been lying to everyone, including his family, about how bad things had gotten. The golf trips, the expensive dinners, the casual spending. It was all being funded by my software development work. Without my income, we would have lost the house 14 months ago. I screenshotted every email, every financial record I could access, building a comprehensive picture of our real situation. Daniel wasn't the successful provider his family believed him to be. He was a man whose pride was so fragile that he'd rather destroy his wife's confidence than admit he needed her help. That night, after Daniel came out of the shower and casually closed his laptop, I started a new email account under my maiden name, Jessica Chen. I forwarded everything to myself, creating a digital trail that would remind me, on the days when I might weaken, exactly why I was making this choice. Over the following weeks, I took inventory of everything I'd built, while Daniel and his family had been dismissing my work as a hobby. My client list included 2 Fortune 500 companies, 3 major startups, and a growing roster of small businesses who paid premium rates for my custom software solutions. I wasn't just good at what I did, I was exceptional. My applications had streamlined operations for companies across 12 states, My database designs had increased efficiency by measurable percentages. My reputation in the development community was solid enough that I could work from anywhere in the world. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. While Daniel struggled to manage a small dental practice in one city, I'd been building a technology consulting business from our home office. Yoris, the irony was staggering. They'd been trying to convince me I was lucky to have Daniel, when the financial reality was exactly the opposite. He was lucky to have me, and too proud to admit it. That realization shifted everything. This wasn't about escaping a bad marriage. This was about escaping people who saw my success as a threat to their worldview. People who would rather see me diminished than acknowledge that their assumptions about traditional gender roles were outdated and wrong. I started planning not just an exit but a transformation. If they wanted to underestimate me, I would use that underestimation as a weapon. I researched business opportunities in tech hubs where my skills would be valued differently. I identified markets where expertise in database architecture and custom software development was in higher demand than Dallas could offer. I began taking online courses in emerging technologies, telling Daniel I was studying to become a better wife and homemaker. He encouraged it, thinking I was finally focusing on self-improvement rather than career ambitions. He had no idea I was preparing to build something far beyond his comprehension. I also started working out, not for vanity but for strength, physical and mental. I took self-defense classes, telling Daniel I wanted to feel safer when he was working late. I opened investment accounts, learning to grow the money I was quietly moving out of our joint finances. Every skill I developed, every plan I made, every dollar I saved, it all happened while Daniel and his family continued their campaign to make me smaller. They thought they were winning because I stopped arguing with their criticisms. They didn't realize I'd stopped caring about their opinions entirely. By early March, I had everything in place. A substantial war chest in my private accounts, a portfolio strong enough to secure clients anywhere in the country, documentation of every manipulative conversation, every coordinated attack on my confidence, every lie Daniel had told about our finances. Most importantly, I had clarity. I understood exactly who these people were and what they thought of me. N'avais confidence. The sad part wasn't their cruelty. It was their assumption that I was too weak or too stupid to recognize it. Kuhalem sras, kuhalem toi, inkulekali fe. They'd given me the gift of absolute moral clarity. I owed them nothing. All I needed was the right moment to disappear. A moment when my absence would be dramatic enough to make a point, but clean enough to ensure they couldn't follow me. Daniel handed me that moment on a silver platter, wrapped in a thunderstorm and tied with his own arrogance. As I stood in that bus terminal, rain soaking through my anniversary dress, I wasn't thinking about their betrayal anymore. I was thinking about my freedom. The waterproof phone in my purse buzzed with a text message. Car arriving in 5 minutes. Flight to Phoenix confirmed for 6 a.m. New life begins tomorrow. Your pilot, Captain Rodriguez. I smiled in the darkness of the empty terminal. Daniel thought he had just delivered the decisive blow in his campaign to break my spirit. Instead, he had given me the perfect excuse to disappear forever. 3 months before that stormy night at the bus terminal, I discovered the true depth of their conspiracy, in the most unexpected way. It wasn't through Daniel's laptop this time. It was through his sister Amanda's wedding planning group chat that I'd been accidentally added to. The notification pinged on my phone during a client video call with TechFlow Industries, one of my biggest accounts. I was demonstrating a new inventory management system I'd built when the message thread appeared on my screen. At first, I thought it was just a typical wedding drama, but as I scrolled through the conversation history during a break, I realized I was looking at something much more sinister. The group included Amanda, Patricia, Daniel's cousin Rebecca Martinez, and 3 women I'd never heard of: Lauren Hayes, Michelle Parker, and Stephanie Wright. What they were discussing wasn't flowers or catering, it was me. Operation Jessica needs to accelerate, Amanda had written the day before. The wedding is the perfect opportunity to show her what a real wife looks like. I want every detail to emphasize traditional family values. Lauren Hayes had responded enthusiastically. I've been researching psychological pressure techniques. The key is making her feel isolated while surrounded by people. We'll seat her at the singles table despite being married, ask her repeatedly about children, and make sure every conversation highlights successful stay-at-home wives. Michelle Parker added, my psychology degree is finally useful for something. Jessica shows classic signs of what we call role confusion. She needs to see examples of women who've embraced their proper place in marriage. We should arrange for the other wives to share stories about how much happier they became after giving up their careers. I sat frozen in my home office, staring at my phone. They had recruited strangers to psychologically manipulate me at Amanda's wedding. Women I'd never met were studying my behavior patterns and planning interventions. But the messages got worse. Much worse. Stephanie Wright, who I learned was a therapist married to one of Daniel's college friends, had written, "I've been observing Jessica at family gatherings. She exhibits defensive behaviors when her work is mentioned and overcompensates with detailed explanations of her projects. This suggests deep insecurity about her value as a wife. She's seeking validation through professional achievement because she knows she's failing in her primary role." Exactly, Rebecca had agreed. My cousin Daniel is too patient. If my husband let me embarrass him the way Jessica embarrasses Daniel, there would be consequences. The phrase "there would be consequences" sent ice through my veins. What kind of consequences were they discussing? Patricia's contribution to the chat revealed the answer. Daniel needs to start implementing financial consequences. Jessica should have to ask permission before spending money on her business expenses. It's his money funding her hobby anyway. Once she realizes how dependent she really is, she'll be more appreciative. That was factually wrong on multiple levels, but the intent was clear. They wanted to manufacture financial dependency to create psychological control. The conversation thread went back months, revealing a level of coordination that was breathtaking in its scope and chilling in its calculation. They had been analyzing my behavior, planning interventions, and strategizing ways to undermine my independence with the methodical precision of a military operation. I discovered that Lauren Hayes was a family therapist who specialized in marriage restoration, helping women rediscover their feminine purpose after being misled by feminist ideology. She had been brought in specifically to develop a psychological profile of me and recommend manipulation strategies. Her analysis was insulting in its assumptions but terrifying in its thoroughness. Jessica Chen Sullivan exhibits classic symptoms of what Dr. James Dobson calls rebellious wife syndrome. She's been enabled by a culture that tells women they can have it all, when biology and psychology clearly indicate that female fulfillment comes through supporting male leadership. Her technical skills are above average, which makes her more dangerous because she can sustain her delusions of independence longer than most women. The clinical language made my skin crawl. They were discussing me like I was a psychological case study rather than a human being with legitimate aspirations and capabilities. Michelle Parker had provided tactical advice. The birthday intervention worked well on my sister-in-law 3 years ago. We coordinated family pressure around her 30th birthday, emphasizing biological clock concerns and social isolation. She quit her marketing job within 6 months and is now perfectly content as a full-time mother. Jessica is 29, so timing is optimal for biological pressure. Biological pressure. They were planning to weaponize my age and fertility against my career ambitions. But the most damaging discovery was how they'd been sabotaging my business relationships behind my back. The thread revealed a coordinated campaign that went far beyond the family emergencies and scheduling conflicts I'd already discovered. Rebecca Martinez, who worked in digital marketing, had been actively monitoring my professional social media accounts and gathering intelligence about my clients and projects. Jessica posted about signing a new contract with Data Vault Corporation, she'd written. I did some research on their decision makers. The CEO, Robert Kim, is very traditional about family values. I'm going to reach out through my network and express concerns about Jessica's reliability due to her work-life balance issues. This explained why the Data Vault contract had been suddenly terminated 2 months earlier. I'd attributed it to budget cuts, but they had been actively sabotaging my professional reputation. The conspiracy went deeper than I'd imagined. Stephanie Wright had been using her therapy credentials to plant doubts about my mental health among Daniel's professional network. I mentioned to Dr. Patterson that Daniel's wife seems to be struggling with anxiety and obsessive behaviors around her work. Medical professionals talk, and word will get back to Daniel that his colleagues are concerned about Jessica's stability. Dr. Patterson was our family physician. They had been poisoning my medical relationships with false psychological assessments. The group had even infiltrated my professional networking. Lauren Hayes had attended 2 Dallas Women in Technology meetups, where I was speaking not to support me, but to gather intelligence and subtly undermine my credibility afterward. Jessica's presentation on database optimization was technically competent, Lauren had reported to the group, but she seemed defensive when other women asked about balancing career and family. I made sure to follow up with several attendees, expressing concern about the stress she seemed to be under. planted seeds about whether pursuing such demanding work was sustainable for a married woman. They had been systematically destroying my professional reputation while I focused on building it. The financial investigation thread was equally disturbing. Patricia had recruited her accountant, Thomas Bradley, to analyze our tax returns and provide ammunition for their campaign. His assessment was both wrong and invasive. Daniel is subsidizing Jessica's hobby to an unsustainable degree. Her business expenses exceed her actual profit margins when you factor in the value of her time. She's essentially paying for the privilege of working, which is classic female entrepreneurship, more about ego than economics. This analysis was completely incorrect. My business was highly profitable, but it revealed how they were framing my success to justify their interference. The thread also exposed their long-term plan for my rehabilitation. Phase 1 involved the birthday intervention and increased family pressure. Phase 2 would escalate to what they called consequence implementation, Daniel taking control of our finances and requiring my business income to go into accounts he managed. Phase 3 was the most chilling. If Jessica continues to resist traditional wife responsibilities after financial controls are implemented, we'll need to consider more serious interventions. Dr. Richardson at Valley Behavioral Health specializes in treating women with career obsession disorders. Insurance would cover treatment if Daniel expresses concerns about her mental health. They were planning to have me institutionalized for refusing to abandon my career. The final revelation came in a conversation between Amanda and Patricia about timing. The anniversary dinner will be perfect for Phase 1 escalation. Jessica always gets emotional about marriage milestones. If we coordinate our messaging correctly, we can make her feel like her marriage is in crisis, unless she makes major changes. They had been planning that anniversary dinner as psychological warfare, using my emotional investment in our marriage as a weapon against my professional independence. Reading those messages, I understood that I wasn't dealing with family members who disagreed with my choices. I was dealing with people who had declared war on my identity and were using sophisticated manipulation tactics to achieve my surrender. The most disturbing part was how normal they made it sound. In their worldview, coordinating to break a woman's spirit wasn't abuse. It was intervention. Destroying my professional relationships wasn't sabotage. It was helping me understand reality. Planning to control my finances and potentially institutionalize me wasn't tyranny. It was love. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. Jennifer Walsh was a former FBI agent who specialized in domestic intelligence gathering. I met her at a coffee shop in Deep Ellum, far from any place Daniel or his family might see us. "This is more extensive than typical family dysfunction," Jennifer said after reviewing the evidence I'd compiled. "This is organized psychological harassment with financial manipulation components. You're dealing with people who see you as a threat that needs to be neutralized." Jennifer's investigation over the following week revealed the full scope of their network. The conspiracy extended far beyond immediate family. Daniel's golf buddies had wives who were recruited to gather social intelligence. His dental practice colleagues had been fed information designed to make them question my stability. Even our neighbors had been subtly influenced to view my work schedule as evidence of marital problems. "They've created an entire ecosystem designed to isolate you and validate their narrative," Jennifer explained during our final meeting. "The most dangerous aspect is how they've convinced themselves they're helping you. True believers are more committed to their cause than people who know they're doing wrong." Jennifer also uncovered financial information that explained their desperation to control me. Daniel's dental practice wasn't just struggling, it was on the verge of bankruptcy. He owed over $180,000 in equipment loans, his malpractice insurance had been canceled due to non-payment, and 3 former patients were pursuing lawsuits for botched procedures. My software development income wasn't just supporting our lifestyle. It was the only thing preventing Daniel's complete financial collapse. "They need you to be dependent on Daniel because the truth is that Daniel is completely dependent on you," Jennifer summarized. "Everything they're doing is projection. They're trying to create the reality they need to exist, rather than acknowledge the reality that actually exists." The investigation also revealed that I wasn't their first target. Michelle Parker's sister-in-law, whom she'd mentioned breaking through birthday intervention, had suffered a complete nervous breakdown after being forced to quit her career. She was now on medication for severe depression and anxiety. Lauren Hayes had a history of using her therapy credentials to manipulate women in her social circle. 3 different women had filed complaints with the state licensing board about her unethical use of therapeutic techniques outside professional settings. Stephanie Wright had been censured by her professional association for providing unauthorized psychological assessments of people she'd never treated professionally. These weren't concerned family members. They They were predators who had turned undermining women's independence into a coordinated hobby. Armed with complete knowledge of their network and tactics, I began planning not just my escape, but my protection. Jennifer helped me understand that simply leaving wouldn't be enough. They would follow me, sabotage my new relationships, and continue their campaign until I was broken or they were stopped. You need to disappear so completely that they can't find you to continue the harassment, Jennifer advised. But you also need to be prepared for them to escalate when they realize they've lost control. That's when I started planning the Phoenix strategy. Not just a new city, but a new identity, new professional network, and new life so thoroughly established that their manipulation tactics would be powerless to touch me. I began working with clients in Phoenix and Los Angeles, building professional relationships that could support my relocation. I researched housing, established business connections, and identified legal representation who specialized in protecting people from psychological harassment. Most importantly, I started documenting everything with the help of a digital forensics expert Jennifer recommended. Every email, every manipulation attempt, every piece of sabotage was being recorded and preserved. By the time Daniel left me at that bus terminal, I had 6 months of evidence, a team of professionals protecting my interests, and a complete plan for not just escaping their control, but ensuring they could never control anyone else the way they'd tried to control me. The rain that night wasn't washing away my old life, it was baptizing me into my new one. As I stood in that terminal waiting for my rescue, I thought about all the women who hadn't been as fortunate as I was, the ones who had been broken by campaigns like this, the ones who had surrendered their dreams because they didn't realize they were under coordinated attack. All the Allstay. I was going to make sure that never happened again. My phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. Phoenix team is ready. Legal papers filed. New identity confirmed. Time to show them what happens when they underestimate a woman who fights back. Daniel thought he was teaching me humility. Instead, he was about to learn what real power looked like. The morning after discovering the wedding group chat conspiracy, I woke up with absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. While Daniel showered and prepared for another day at his failing dental practice, I sat at our kitchen island drinking coffee and planning the most elaborate disappearing act in modern relationship history. The difference between running away and strategic relocation is preparation. I wasn't going to flee like a victim. I was going to relocate like a CEO expanding operations. My first call was to Marcus Chen, my cousin in Silicon Valley, who specialized in cybersecurity for high-net-worth individuals. Marcus had always been the family success story, building a company that protected celebrities and executives from digital threats. Now I needed his expertise for a different kind of protection. Jessica, you're talking about going completely dark, Marcus said after I explained my situation. That's possible, but it requires absolute commitment. Once we start this process, there's no halfway. Are you sure? I'm sure, I replied, watching Daniel through the kitchen window as he scraped ice off his windshield. They've been treating me like a target for months. It's time I started acting like one. Marcus flew to Dallas the next weekend, ostensibly for a family visit, but actually to help me construct what he called digital armor. We worked from a WeWork space in downtown Dallas, far from any place Daniel might accidentally discover us. Identity protection starts with understanding how people track you, Marcus explained, setting up multiple laptops in our temporary workspace. They're monitoring your current digital footprint, so we need to build a parallel identity that's completely invisible to them. The process was more complex than I'd imagined. Marcus helped me establish new email accounts, social media profiles, and professional networking accounts under variations of my maiden name. Jessica Chen became JC Chen, then J Chen Consulting, then Jade Chen Technologies. Each iteration was legally legitimate but increasingly disconnected from my married identity. The key is layered misdirection, Marcus explained, as he configured virtual private networks and encrypted communication channels. If they try to trace your digital activity after you disappear, they'll hit dead ends at every turn. We created decoy digital breadcrumbs designed to confuse anyone trying to track my movements. Fake apartment searches in Austin, job applications in Seattle, even a dating profile in Portland that would never be activated but would show up in data searches. Anyone trying to predict where I'd gone would find evidence pointing in 6 different directions. The financial aspect required even more sophisticated planning. Marcus introduced me to Elena Rodriguez, a forensic accountant who specialized in asset protection for people escaping domestic situations. Elena was a former federal investigator who understood exactly what we were dealing with. Financial abuse often escalates when victims try to leave, Elena explained during our first meeting at her office in Plano. Your husband's family has already demonstrated coordinated economic warfare. We need to assume they'll attempt to freeze assets, claim fraud, or use legal mechanisms to prevent your departure. Elena helped me understand how to legally protect my assets while maintaining complete transparency with tax authorities. Over the following month, she guided me through establishing business entities that would be immune to Daniel's potential interference. Jessica Chen Consulting becomes a Texas LLC, which then establishes Jade Technologies as an Arizona corporation, Elena explained. Your intellectual property and client contracts transfer to the Arizona entity, which has no legal connection to your marriage or your husband's debts. The process required careful timing and documentation. Every financial transaction had to be legitimate and defensible, but structured to create maximum protection and minimum visibility. Meanwhile, I began cultivating my Phoenix network with the intensity of someone planning a political campaign. Through professional forums and video conferences, I connected with technology leaders, potential clients, and business mentors who could support my relocation. Dr. Sarah Kim, Chief Technology Officer at Phoenix Digital Solutions, became my primary contact and unofficial mentor. Sarah had built her company from a one-person consulting practice into a 50-employee firm specializing in enterprise software solutions. She understood exactly what I was trying to accomplish. Dallas has a decent tech scene, but Phoenix is exploding, Sarah told me during one of our weekly video calls. We're seeing incredible growth in fintech, healthcare technology, and logistics software. Your database expertise would be extremely valuable here. Sarah introduced me to Phoenix Women in Technology, Arizona Technology Council, and Desert Tech Entrepreneurs. I began attending virtual meetups, participating in online panels, and gradually building relationships that would support my transition. The most important connection was with Catherine Walsh, a business attorney who specialized in technology startups and had experience protecting entrepreneurs from family interference. I've seen situations like yours before, Catherine said during our confidential consultation. Family members who view a woman's success as a threat often escalate to legal harassment. We need to bulletproof your business structure and establish clear boundaries before you relocate. Catherine helped me understand the legal implications of my planned disappearance. Filing for divorce from Arizona would complicate Daniel's ability to interfere with my business operations. Establishing Arizona residency before initiating any legal proceedings would give me home court advantage in any disputes. The key is making your relocation look like a business decision rather than an escape, Catherine advised. Document every professional reason for the move. Create a paper trail showing logical business expansion into Arizona markets. This strategy required actually building business relationships that justified the relocation. I began pursuing Arizona clients with unprecedented intensity, not just for cover, but because I genuinely wanted to succeed in my new market. My breakthrough came through an introduction Sarah Kim arranged with Southwest Medical Systems, a Phoenix-based healthcare company that needed a complete database overhaul for their patient management system. The project was massive, 6 months of work worth $180,000 and required on-site presence in Phoenix. This is exactly what we need, I told Catherine after securing the contract. Legitimate business requirement for relocation, substantial income source, and professional relationships that establish genuine Arizona connections. While building my professional foundation in Phoenix, I simultaneously began deconstructing my Dallas life with surgical precision. The process required maintaining perfect normalcy while systematically preparing for total departure. I started with physical possessions, deciding what could be replaced versus what held irreplaceable value. Important documents went into a safety deposit box in Phoenix that I opened during a supposed client visit. Sentimental items were gradually moved to my cousin Marcus's house in California, ostensibly for safekeeping, while we renovated our Dallas home. I'm thinking about updating our photo displays, I told Daniel casually, boxing up family pictures that included my grandmother's jewelry and my college awards. Maybe we could create a more modern aesthetic. Daniel supported the project, never suspecting that updating meant removing everything that mattered to me from our shared space. The clothing transition was more delicate. I couldn't suddenly change my wardrobe without triggering suspicion, but I needed professional attire appropriate for Phoenix's business climate. I solved this by signing up for a personal styling service, telling Daniel I wanted to improve my appearance to be a better reflection of his success. I've been thinking about what your mother said about the presentation, I mentioned over dinner one evening. Maybe I should invest in some more professional clothing. Daniel was delighted by what he interpreted as evidence that his family's criticism was finally having the desired effect. He even offered to pay for the styling service, unknowingly funding my preparation for a life without him. The most complex aspect was technological transition. My work required specialized software, custom development environments, and client relationships that couldn't be easily replicated. I needed to establish complete technological independence without alerting Daniel to my preparations. Marcus helped me build redundant systems that would allow seamless transition. Cloud-based development environments that could be accessed from anywhere. Client communication systems that routed through neutral servers. Backup systems for every piece of software and data I'd need to continue working. We're essentially creating a mobile office that exists entirely in cyberspace, Marcus explained as we configured the final security protocols. No matter what happens to your physical location, your business operations can continue without interruption. The psychological preparation was equally important. Dr. Lisa Martinez, a therapist who specialized in helping people escape manipulative relationships, helped me understand what I'd face during and after my departure. Your husband and his family have been controlling you through emotional manipulation, Dr. Martinez explained during our sessions. When that control is removed, they'll likely escalate to more aggressive tactics. You need to be prepared for the emotional impact of their reaction. Dr. Martinez helped me develop mental strategies for dealing with guilt, doubt, and the inevitable attempts to manipulate me into returning. We practiced responses to common manipulation tactics and built confidence in my right to make independent choices. Remember, she told me during one of our final sessions, feeling guilty about protecting yourself is a sign that the manipulation was effective. Healthy people don't try to control other adults. Your guilt is evidence of how much you've been programmed to prioritize their comfort over your well-being. As my departure date approached, I began implementing what Marcus called behavioral camouflage, subtle changes in my routine designed to make my eventual absence seem less dramatic. I started working longer hours, telling Daniel I was pursuing larger contracts to build our financial security. This explained increased time away from home and provided cover for my Phoenix client meetings. I also began mentioning stress and fatigue, suggesting that I might need a break from intensive work. I've been thinking about taking some time off after this next big project, I mentioned casually during dinner at Patricia's house. Maybe Daniel's right that I've been working too hard. The family's satisfaction was palpable. They interpreted my comments as evidence that their pressure campaign was succeeding, never realizing I was preparing them for my absence. 2 weeks before my planned departure, I executed the most critical phase, financial consolidation. Elena Rodriguez had prepared a precise timeline for transferring assets without triggering automatic alerts or creating legal vulnerabilities. Tuesday morning, Daniel will be at his dental conference in Houston, Elena noted, reviewing our schedule. That gives us a 72-hour window to complete all financial transfers and legal documentation. The process was nerve-wracking but flawless. Business assets transferred to my Arizona corporation. Personal savings moved to protected accounts. Investment portfolios shifted to advisors who specialized in protecting assets from family interference. By Friday evening, when Daniel returned from Houston, my financial independence was complete and legally bulletproof. We had dinner at our usual restaurant, where Daniel talked enthusiastically about new dental techniques he'd learned at the conference. I'm thinking about investing in some new equipment, he said, studying the wine list. Business has been picking up lately. I smiled and nodded, knowing that his business was actually 3 weeks away from bankruptcy, and that the pickup was entirely due to my discreet loan payments, keeping his creditors at bay. Payments that would stop the moment I disappeared. That sounds like a great investment, I replied, raising my glass in a toast to his future success. A future that would begin the moment he realized his meal ticket had permanently left the table. My phone buzzed with a message from Catherine Walsh. Phoenix apartment ready. Private jet confirmed for Monday. Legal documents filed and ready for service. You're cleared for departure. Daniel noticed my smile. Good news? The best, I replied, which was absolutely true. I have a feeling everything is about to change. As we drove home through the Dallas traffic, I looked out at the city I'd called home for 6 years and felt nothing but anticipation for the adventure ahead. The woman who had once apologized for having career ambitions was about to demonstrate exactly what happened when those ambitions were given room to flourish. Daniel and his family had spent months trying to convince me I needed them. In 72 hours, they would discover how completely they'd been wrong. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear, with none of the storm clouds that would dominate the evening. I woke before my alarm, my body electric with anticipation. Today was execution day. the culmination of 6 months of meticulous planning compressed into 12 hours of precision timing. Daniel was already in the shower, completely oblivious that this would be the last morning we'd ever share the same space. I made his coffee exactly as he liked it, 2 sugars, splash of cream, and prepared his breakfast with the same attention to detail I'd shown for 5 years. The performance had to be flawless until the final curtain. "Big day ahead?" he asked, scrolling through his phone while eating the scrambled eggs I'd made. "Huge client presentation this afternoon," I replied, which was technically true. I would indeed be presenting to clients, just not in Dallas, and not as Mrs. Daniel Sullivan. I might be working late to prepare. "That's my girl," Daniel said, patting my hand condescendingly. "Working hard to build our future. Our future." If only he knew that our future had an expiration date of approximately 10 hours. Phase 1 of my departure strategy began the moment Daniel left for his dental practice. I had exactly 8 hours before he would expect me home, and every minute was choreographed with military precision. My first call was to Captain Rodriguez, the private pilot who would be flying me to Phoenix. Tony Rodriguez was a former Air Force pilot who specialized in discreet transportation for high-net-worth individuals. Marcus had recommended him specifically because of his experience with sensitive departures. "Good morning, Miss Chen." Tony's voice was calm and professional. "The weather looks perfect for our 6 p.m. departure. Aircraft are fueled and ready at Dallas Executive Airport. Do you have the private terminal access codes I sent?" "Confirmed," I replied, checking the encrypted message on my secure phone. "Passenger manifest shows J. Chen, correct?" "Affirmative. As far as anyone knows, Jessica Chen Sullivan doesn't exist on today's flight logs." The beauty of Tony's service was complete discretion. No passenger manifest that could be traced, no credit card records that could be subpoenaed, no digital trail that could be followed. I would board that plane as Jessica Chen and land in Phoenix as someone Daniel could never track. Phase 2 involved final asset transfers that couldn't be completed until markets opened. Elena Rodriguez had scheduled a conference call for 9 a.m. to execute the last financial maneuvers that would make my independence permanent and irreversible. "Jessica, this is it," Elena said as we connected with her team of attorneys and accountants. "Once we execute these transfers, there's no going back. Your husband will have no legal access to any assets or business income. Are you ready to proceed?" "Execute," I said, feeling a surge of power at the finality of the word. For the next hour, I watched as my financial life transformed completely. Business contracts transferred to Jade Technologies in Arizona. Intellectual property rights assigned to my new corporate entity. Client retainer fees moved to protected accounts. Even my health insurance shifted to a plan purchased through my Arizona business registration. The most satisfying moment was transferring the Southwest Medical Systems contract, worth $180,000, to my Phoenix-based company. Daniel had no idea that his wife had just secured more income in one contract than his dental practice had generated in the past 18 months. "Transfers complete," Elena announced at 10:15 a.m. "Jessica Chen Sullivan is now financially independent of all Texas-based assets and obligations. Jade Technologies is fully operational and legally protected." Phase 3 required visiting locations around Dallas to collect items I'd strategically positioned over the past month. Safety deposit boxes, storage units, and trusted friends all held pieces of my new life that needed to be assembled before departure. My first stop was the Chase Bank branch in Uptown, where I'd maintained a safety deposit box under my maiden name since January. Inside were copies of all my professional certifications, my passport, birth certificate, and $15,000 in cash that Elena had advised keeping liquid for emergencies. Next was the U-Haul storage facility near Love Field, where I'd been gradually moving items over the past 6 weeks. 3 boxes contained my most important possessions: photo albums, my grandmother's jewelry, college awards, and the laptop containing 7 years of software development work that represented my entire professional portfolio. The most important stop was Marcus's apartment in Deep Ellum, where he'd been safeguarding the secure communication equipment and encrypted drives containing all the evidence of Daniel's family's conspiracy. This wasn't just insurance, it was ammunition. "Everything's ready," Marcus said, handing me a sleek black briefcase. "Satellite phone, encrypted communication devices, complete digital copies of all evidence, and legal documentation that proves everything you've told people. If they try to claim you've had a breakdown or disappeared irrationally, you have proof of exactly why you left." The briefcase also contained something else, a detailed dossier on each member of Daniel's family, compiled by Jennifer Walsh's investigation team. Their financial situations, professional vulnerabilities, and personal secrets. Information I hoped never to use, but needed to have if they escalated their harassment campaign. Phase 4 was the most psychologically difficult, returning home to maintain normalcy while knowing I would never see that house again. I spent the afternoon moving through rooms that had been my life for 5 years, saying goodbye to a version of myself that was about to cease existing. I sat in my home office for the last time, looking at the space where I'd built a 6-figure business while being dismissed as someone playing with computer hobbies. The irony was profound. In this room, I'd generated more income than Daniel's entire dental practice, yet he'd never once acknowledged the sophistication of what I was accomplishing. The kitchen, where I'd made thousands of meals for someone who criticized my contributions to our life. The living room, where I'd entertained his friends and family while being treated as a supporting character in my own existence. The bedroom, where I'd shared space with someone who was actively working to diminish my potential. None of it felt like a loss. It felt like shedding skin that had become too small. At 3 p.m., I received the call that would trigger the final phase of my departure. It was from Amanda, Daniel's sister, and I knew immediately what she was calling about. "Jessica, I need to talk to you about tonight," Amanda said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of manufactured concern. "We've all been worried about you lately, and we think it would be good for you to join us for dinner at Mom's house." This was it. The anniversary dinner ambush they'd been planning for months. The psychological intervention designed to break my spirit and force my surrender to their vision of appropriate feminine behavior. "Of course," I replied, injecting enthusiasm into my voice. "I'd love to spend time with the family tonight. What time should Daniel and I be there?" "Actually, I was hoping you could come a little early. Maybe 5:30? Daniel can join us after he finishes at the practice. We wanted to have some girl talk first." Girl talk. They wanted to isolate me from Daniel so they could implement their coordinated psychological assault without witnesses. "Perfect. That sounds wonderful," I said. "I'll see you at 5:30. Amanda's satisfaction was audible. They thought they were about to spring their trap, never realizing they were about to discover that their prey had already flown the coop. At 4 p.m., I began the final performance of my marriage. I showered and dressed carefully in the blue dress Daniel had complimented months earlier, the same dress I'd be wearing when he abandoned me at the bus terminal. I styled my hair, applied makeup, and put on the pearl earrings Patricia had given me for Christmas. I wanted to look exactly like the compliant wife they expected to break tonight. I left our house at 4:45 p.m., driving toward Highland Park as if I were heading to the family dinner that would never happen. But instead of turning toward Patricia's house, I continued straight to Dallas Executive Airport, where Captain Rodriguez was conducting final pre-flight checks on our aircraft. The private aviation terminal was quiet and elegant, designed for people who valued discretion above all else. I checked in under the name Jay Chen, showing identification that matched perfectly with the flight manifest. "Miss Chen," the terminal manager greeted me professionally, "your aircraft is ready for departure. Captain Rodriguez is completing his final weather briefing and will be ready to taxi in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, I would be airborne and beyond the reach of Daniel's family forever. I sat in the leather chair overlooking the tarmac and composed 3 text messages that would be automatically sent at precisely 6:30 p.m., 30 minutes after my planned departure time. The first message went to Daniel. "I know about the emails, the family meetings, and the campaign to break my spirit. I know about your financial situation and how my income has been keeping you afloat. I'm filing for divorce and will not be returning. All communication should go through my attorney, Catherine Walsh, whose contact information is attached." The second message went to Amanda. "I won't be making it to dinner tonight, or any night. I found the wedding group chat and all your psychological manipulation plans. I've documented everything and shared it with legal counsel. Any attempt to contact me or interfere with my new life will be met with restraining orders and criminal charges." The third message went to Patricia. "Your son left me at a bus terminal tonight thinking he was teaching me humility. Instead, he gave me the perfect excuse to disappear forever. I hope you're proud of the man you raised." At exactly 6 p.m., Captain Rodriguez appeared in the terminal doorway. "Miss Chen, we're ready for departure." I followed him across the tarmac to the sleek Cessna Citation that would carry me to my new life. The aircraft was beautiful, white with blue trim, its interior appointed with leather seats and polished wood accents. This was how successful people traveled, and for the first time in my life, I was traveling as one of them. First time on a private jet? Tony asked as he helped me with my seatbelt. First time doing a lot of things, I replied, smiling at the understatement. As we taxied toward the runway, I looked out the window at Dallas, the city where I had spent 5 years being systematically diminished by people who claimed to love me. The city where I had discovered my strength and built the foundation for everything that came next. The takeoff was smooth and powerful. As the aircraft climbed into the clear evening sky, I watched the lights of Dallas shrink below us until they became just another constellation in the distance. At exactly 6:30 p.m., my phone began buzzing with incoming calls and messages. Daniel, Amanda, Patricia, Marcus, Ryan. Numbers I didn't recognize. They were discovering that their carefully planned intervention had just encountered an empty house and an impossible situation. I turned off the phone and handed it to Captain Rodriguez. Would you mind disposing of this when we land? I won't be needing it anymore. My pleasure, Miss Chen. As we flew west toward Phoenix and my new life, I thought about the woman who had once apologized for having career ambitions, who had questioned her own worth because other people told her she was insufficient, who had spent years trying to be small enough to fit into boxes other people had built for her. That woman was gone forever, left behind in a city that could never hold the person I was becoming. The jet's engines hummed with quiet power as we crossed into New Mexico airspace. Through the window, I could see storm clouds building in the distance. The same storm system that would soon dump rain on the bus terminal where Daniel expected to find his broken, grateful wife. Instead, he would find an empty building and the realization that he had finally pushed the wrong woman too far. ETA Phoenix is 8:45 p.m. local time, Captain Rodriguez announced over the intercom. Welcome to your new life, Miss Chen. Below us, lightning illuminated the desert landscape that would soon be my home. The storm was just beginning. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of getting wet. I was flying above the clouds, heading toward a future Daniel could never have imagined and would never be able to touch. Landing in Phoenix at 8:45 p.m. felt like stepping onto an alien planet where the rules I'd lived by for 5 years simply didn't exist. The desert air was warm and dry, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. As I walked across the tarmac at Phoenix Sky Harbor's private aviation terminal, I wasn't just changing cities, I was changing identities. My new apartment in Scottsdale's Kierland Commons was everything my Dallas life hadn't been: modern, minimalist, and entirely mine. The furnished corporate housing Elena had arranged overlooked the McDowell Mountains, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the desert landscape like living artwork. For the first time in years, I could see for miles in every direction without obstruction. Dr. Sarah Kim met me at the apartment with champagne and a welcome package that included keys to a leased BMW, business cards for Jade Technologies, and contracts for 3 additional clients she'd secured during my transition week. Phoenix doesn't just welcome ambitious women, Sarah said as we toasted my arrival on the apartment's balcony. We celebrate them. You're gonna thrive here in ways Dallas never allowed. The transformation began immediately, starting with the most basic elements of daily life. In Dallas, my mornings had revolved around Daniel's schedule, his coffee preferences, his breakfast requirements, his need for household tranquility before facing his failing dental practice. In Phoenix, my mornings belonged entirely to me. I woke at 5:30 a.m. not because I had to, but because I wanted to catch the sunrise over the mountains. I made coffee exactly as I liked it: strong, black, no sugar, and spent the first hour of each day on my balcony, planning strategies for clients who valued my expertise rather than tolerating my hobby. The contrast was immediately apparent in my work environment. My home office in Dallas had been relegated to the spare bedroom, constantly interrupted by Daniel's needs and family obligations. My Phoenix office occupied the apartment's primary living space, with multiple monitors, professional lighting for video conferences, and acoustic treatments that ensured crystal-clear client calls. Within my first week, I was operating at a level of professional efficiency I'd never achieved in Dallas. Without the constant drain of managing Daniel's emotional needs and family politics, my cognitive capacity expanded dramatically. Projects that had taken me weeks to complete in Texas were finished in days. The Southwest Medical Systems contract became my proving ground for demonstrating what Jessica Chen could accomplish when she wasn't being systematically undermined. The healthcare database they needed wasn't just a technical challenge, it was an opportunity to revolutionize how patient information flowed through their entire organization. Most consultants give us exactly what we ask for, explained Dr. Michael Torres, Southwest Medical's Chief Information Officer, during our first in-person meeting. But you're showing us solutions we didn't know we needed. The system I designed for Southwest Medical didn't just organize their patient data. It integrated their scheduling, billing, insurance verification, and treatment tracking into a seamless platform that reduced administrative overhead by 40%. What should have been a 6-month project was completed in 10 weeks, exceeding every performance metric they'd established. "Jessica, this isn't just database management," Dr. Torres said during the final presentation to their board of directors. "This is a business transformation. You've essentially given us a competitive advantage in healthcare delivery." The success of the Southwest Medical Project generated referrals faster than I could process them. Phoenix's healthcare technology sector was expanding rapidly, and word spread quickly about the consultant who delivered solutions that transformed operations rather than just meeting requirements. Within 2 months, Jade Technologies had secured contracts with 4 additional healthcare organizations, 2 financial services companies, and a logistics firm that managed supply chains across the Southwest. My monthly revenue exceeded $45,000, more than Daniel's dental practice had ever generated in its best quarter. But the most profound transformation wasn't financial. It was psychological. In Dallas, I had constantly questioned my own judgment, seeking validation from people who were actively working to undermine my confidence. In Phoenix, I was surrounded by professionals who assumed competence until proven otherwise. The difference became clear during my first presentation to the Arizona Technology Council, a networking organization that connected entrepreneurs, investors, and established companies across the state. In Dallas, I had been reluctant to speak publicly about my work, knowing that Daniel's family would interpret any professional recognition as evidence of my misplaced priorities. Standing before 200 technology leaders at the Phoenician Resort, presenting my research on healthcare database optimization, I experienced something I'd never felt before: complete confidence in my own expertise. The traditional approach to healthcare data management treats information silos as inevitable, I explained to the audience. But with proper system architecture, we can create integrated platforms that improve patient outcomes while reducing administrative costs by 30 to 40%. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Business cards exchanged, consulting inquiries submitted, 3 venture capital firms requested meetings to discuss funding expansion of my methodologies into a scalable software platform. "You're describing solutions that could revolutionize healthcare delivery," said Robert Chen, managing partner at Desert Ventures, one of Phoenix's most successful VC firms. "Have you considered building a software company around these concepts rather than just consulting?" I hadn't considered it, but only because in Dallas, suggesting such ambition would have triggered another family intervention about my unrealistic expectations and inflated ego. In Phoenix, ambitious thinking was viewed as evidence of intelligence rather than character defects. That conversation with Robert Chen led to the most transformative relationship of my professional life. Desert Ventures specialized in healthcare technology startups, and they saw potential in my work that went far beyond individual consulting contracts. "Most healthcare IT consultants optimize existing systems," Robert explained during our first formal meeting at Desert Ventures offices in downtown Phoenix. "You're redesigning fundamental approaches to data integration. That's not consulting. That's intellectual property with massive scaling potential." Over the following month, Robert and his team helped me understand how to transform my consulting expertise into a technology platform that could serve healthcare organizations nationwide. The concept was elegant. Instead of custom building databases for each client, I would develop modular software solutions that could be adapted to different healthcare environments while maintaining the integration principles that made my work so effective. "We're looking at a potential market of over 6,000 hospitals and 250,000 medical practices nationwide," explained Jennifer Liu, Desert Ventures healthcare technology analyst. "If your platform can deliver even half the efficiency improvements you've demonstrated in Phoenix, we're talking about a billion-dollar market opportunity." The transition from consultant to entrepreneur required skills I'd never had the opportunity to develop during my marriage. Daniel had controlled our financial decisions, dismissing my input as unnecessarily complicated. In Phoenix, I was learning to analyze investment terms, negotiate equity structures, and make strategic decisions that would determine the trajectory of my company's growth. Elena Rodriguez flew to Phoenix monthly to help me navigate the financial complexity of venture capital funding. "You're not just building a business," she explained during one of our strategy sessions. "You're building wealth that will make you completely independent of anyone who might try to control your choices." The legal aspects were equally complex, requiring expertise in intellectual property protection, corporate governance, and employment law. Catherine Walsh had recommended Patricia Kim, a Phoenix-based attorney who specialized in technology startups and had experience protecting entrepreneurs from family interference. "Your situation isn't uncommon," Patricia explained during our first meeting. Family members often escalate harassment when they realize their control has been permanently broken. We need to establish legal barriers that prevent any future interference with your business operations. Those legal barriers became crucial when Daniel's family finally located me. 3 months after my departure, private investigators hired by Patricia Sullivan tracked down my Phoenix address and business registration. The harassment campaign that followed was more sophisticated and aggressive than anything I'd experienced in Dallas. They started with attempted financial sabotage. Marcus Thompson, Daniel's golf buddy who worked in commercial real estate, contacted several of my Phoenix clients with fabricated concerns about my reliability and mental stability. 2 clients requested clarification meetings, providing me with transcripts of Marcus's calls that revealed the coordinated nature of their campaign. Mrs. Chen Sullivan has been experiencing significant personal stress that's affecting her professional judgment, Marcus had told the CEO of Desert Regional Medical Center. Her husband is very concerned about her recent erratic behavior and wanted to ensure that your organization isn't exposed to liability from working with someone who may not be in a stable condition to deliver on her commitments. The calls backfired spectacularly. My Phoenix clients had worked with me for months and had direct evidence of my competence and professionalism. Instead of creating doubt about my reliability, Marcus's interference generated outrage about harassment from people in my previous city. Dr. Torres from Southwest Medical was particularly incensed. "Someone called here claiming to represent concerns about your mental health," he told me during an emergency meeting he'd requested. "I want you to know that we consider this attempted sabotage of a valued business partner, and we're prepared to provide whatever legal support you need to stop this harassment." Similar reactions came from my other clients. Rather than undermining my professional relationships, Daniel's family had inadvertently created a protective network of business leaders who were personally invested in defending me from their attacks. The harassment escalated when Amanda Sullivan flew to Phoenix and attempted to ambush me at my office building. Security footage captured her confronting me in the lobby, demanding that I, quote, "stop this selfishness and come home to fix your marriage." "Jessica, you've lost your mind," Amanda shouted as building security approached. "Daniel is a good man who provided for you, and you've thrown it all away for some fantasy about being a businesswoman. You're 29 years old, your biological clock is ticking, and you're wasting your prime years on this ridiculous career obsession." The security team handled Amanda's removal professionally, but her public meltdown was recorded by multiple witnesses and later used by my legal team to obtain a restraining order that prohibited any member of Daniel's family from contacting me or my business associates. More importantly, Amanda's Phoenix visit revealed how completely they had misunderstood my transformation. She had expected to find a woman struggling to survive alone, someone who could be convinced to return to the security of traditional marriage. Instead, she discovered someone who had built a thriving technology company and was being courted by venture capital firms. The contrast between their expectations and my reality became even more stark when Phoenix Business Journal published a cover story about my company's successful funding round. Desert Ventures had led a $2.3 million investment in Jade Technologies, valuing the company at $12 million and positioning it for national expansion. "Local entrepreneur transforms healthcare IT," read the headline, accompanied by a professional photo of me in my Scottsdale office, surrounded by monitors displaying the software platforms that were revolutionizing patient data management across Arizona. The article detailed my transition from Dallas consultant to Phoenix entrepreneur, though it diplomatically avoided mentioning the family dynamics that had triggered my relocation. Instead, it focused on the technical innovations and business success that had made me one of Arizona's most promising young technology leaders. Chen's approach to healthcare database integration represents a fundamental shift in how medical organizations think about information management. The article quoted Dr. Torres. "She's not just optimizing existing systems. She's creating entirely new paradigms for patient data utilization." Sarah Kim had arranged for the article to be picked up by TechCrunch and Forbes, generating national attention for Jade Technologies and positioning me as a thought leader in healthcare technology innovation. Speaking requests began arriving from conferences across the country, and my business email was flooded with inquiries from healthcare organizations interested in implementing my platforms. The media attention also triggered responses from Dallas that revealed how thoroughly I had escaped their understanding. Daniel's sister Jenny called the Phoenix Business Journal, attempting to provide context about my background that would undermine the article's credibility. "Jessica has always been prone to grandiose thinking," Jenny told the reporter, according to a recording the journalist later shared with my legal team. "Her family is very concerned about her mental health and the unrealistic claims she's making about her business success." The journalist's response was perfect. Ma'am, we've verified Ms. Chen's business revenues, client testimonials, and venture capital funding through independent sources. Are you suggesting that Desert Ventures, Southwest Medical Systems, and the Arizona Technology Council are all participants in some kind of shared delusion? Jenny's call was the last attempt at external sabotage. After 6 months of failed harassment and escalating legal consequences, Daniel's family finally accepted that their campaign had not only failed, it had backfired so completely that they had inadvertently provided evidence for criminal charges if they continued their interference. By my first anniversary in Phoenix, Jade Technologies employed 12 people, maintained offices in 2 states, and was generating annual revenue approaching $3 million. I had transformed from a woman who apologized for having career ambitions to an entrepreneur who is reshaping an entire industry. The most satisfying moment came when Harvard Business School invited me to teach a semester-long course on healthcare technology innovation. Standing in the lecture hall where future business leaders would learn strategies I had developed, I thought about the woman who had once been told that her computer work was just a hobby that distracted from her real responsibilities as a wife. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood exactly how much she was capable of accomplishing when she wasn't being systematically diminished by people who claimed to love her. The transformation was complete, but the story was just beginning. 18 months after my escape from Dallas, I stood on the stage of the Moscone Center in San Francisco, delivering the opening keynote at Health Tech Summit 2024. The audience of 3,000 healthcare executives, technology leaders, and venture capitalists represented the most influential gathering in the industry, and they were listening to insights developed by someone Daniel's family had dismissed as a woman playing with computer hobbies. The future of healthcare delivery isn't about bigger hospitals or more sophisticated equipment, I said, advancing to a slide showing patient outcome improvements across my client network. It's about intelligent data integration that allows medical professionals to make better decisions faster. In the past 18 months, our platforms have reduced diagnostic errors by 23% and shortened average treatment times by 31% across 14 healthcare systems. The statistics were staggering, but more importantly, they were real. Jade Technologies had evolved from a Phoenix startup to a national healthcare platform, trusted by organizations from Mayo Clinic's Arizona campus to Massachusetts General Hospital. We weren't just optimizing databases anymore. We were fundamentally changing how medical information flowed through the American healthcare system. After my presentation, Dr. Margaret Foster, Chief Medical Officer at Johns Hopkins, approached me during the networking break. Ms. Chen, your platform just solved a problem we've been struggling with for 7 years. Our patient data integration has improved our emergency response times by 40%. You've literally saved lives. These weren't the kind of compliments you get for being a supportive wife or learning to be more appreciative of traditional gender roles. These were acknowledgments of intellectual contribution that changed how entire industries operated. The recognition had started gradually, but accelerated rapidly, once the healthcare community understood what Jade Technologies actually accomplished. The first major validation came when IBM's Watson Health division invited me to collaborate on artificial intelligence applications for patient data analysis. Your integration methodologies are the missing piece we've been looking for, explained Dr. Kevin Walsh, IBM's Director of Healthcare AI, during our initial partnership meeting in New York. Watson can process massive amounts of medical information, but your platforms organize that information in ways that make AI recommendations actually useful to practicing physicians. The IBM partnership was worth $8.5 million over 3 years and positioned Jade Technologies as a key player in the emerging field of AI-assisted healthcare delivery. More importantly, it provided validation from one of the world's most prestigious technology companies that my work represented genuine innovation rather than incremental improvement. That validation opened doors I couldn't have imagined during my Dallas years. The World Health Organization invited me to consult on global health data standardization projects. The Department of Veterans Affairs contracted Jade Technologies to optimize patient care coordination across their national hospital network. Medical schools began incorporating our case studies into their health informatics curricula. But the recognition that meant the most came from an unexpected source. MIT's Sloan School of Management invited me to receive their Technology Innovation Award for developing breakthrough solutions that demonstrate how individual innovation can transform entire industries. Standing in MIT's Crest Auditorium, accepting an award from one of the world's most prestigious technology institutions, I thought about the woman who had once apologized for taking client calls during family dinners. The transformation felt surreal, like watching someone else's life unfold. The most remarkable aspect of Ms. Chen's work, said Dr. Andrew Peterson, MIT's Dean of Technology Innovation, during the presentation ceremony, is how she identified fundamental inefficiencies that entire industries had accepted as inevitable. Her solutions don't just improve existing systems, they prove that those systems were designed incorrectly from the beginning. The MIT award triggered a cascade of recognition that elevated my professional status beyond anything I could have achieved, while managing Daniel's emotional needs and family politics. Harvard Business Review published my article on healthcare data integration as their cover story. The Wall Street Journal featured my business model in their weekend edition. Forbes included me in their 30 under 30 inches healthcare innovators list, despite being 31 years old. "We're making an exception to our age requirement," explained Jennifer Martinez, Forbes healthcare editor, "because your impact on the industry has already exceeded what most innovators accomplish in entire careers." Each recognition milestone generated media inquiries that revealed how completely my narrative had shifted. Journalists wanted to understand how a relatively unknown consultant had built a company that was reshaping healthcare delivery. The questions focused on innovation strategies, market analysis, and scaling methodologies, topics that demonstrated respect for my intellectual capabilities rather than curiosity about my personal choices. During an interview with TechCrunch about the future of healthcare technology, the reporter asked about my background and what had inspired my transition from consulting to entrepreneurship. I realized that individual consulting projects, no matter how successful, could only improve one organization at a time, I explained. Building scalable platforms allows us to improve healthcare delivery for millions of patients simultaneously. It's more challenging but infinitely more rewarding. I didn't mention Daniel, his family, or the psychological warfare that had forced my relocation to Phoenix. The story had evolved beyond them. They were no longer relevant to understanding who I had become or what I was accomplishing. The most significant recognition came when the American Medical Association invited me to join their Health Information Technology Advisory Council, a position that involved shaping national policy for healthcare data management. Council membership included chief medical officers from major hospital systems, technology executives from companies like Google and Microsoft, and academic researchers from institutions like Stanford and Johns Hopkins. Your practical experience implementing data integration solutions gives you perspectives that pure researchers or technology theorists don't possess, explained Dr. Lisa Chen, the AMA's chief technology officer. We need voices that understand both the technical possibilities and the operational realities of healthcare delivery. The advisory council work required monthly trips to Chicago and Washington, D.C., where I participated in discussions that would determine how American healthcare organizations handled patient information for the next decade. The responsibility was immense but thrilling. Decisions we made would affect every hospital, clinic, and medical practice in the country. During one particularly intensive council session, focused on federal healthcare data standards, I found myself representing the technology industry's perspective in debates with senior officials from the Department of Health and Human Services. The discussions were highly technical and required a deep understanding of both software architecture and healthcare delivery systems. "Ms. Chen, your analysis of interoperability challenges is exactly what we needed to hear," said Deputy Secretary Michael Rodriguez after a presentation I'd given on cross-system data sharing. "Most technology companies tell us what's theoretically possible. You're telling us what actually works in real-world healthcare environments." These conversations were taking place at the highest levels of American healthcare policy, involving decisions that would impact hundreds of millions of patients. The woman Daniel had tried to confine to domestic support roles was now influencing national healthcare strategy. The financial recognition was equally dramatic. By the end of my second year in Phoenix, Jade Technologies was valued at $47 million, following a Series B funding round, led by Andreessen Horowitz, one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious venture capital firms. "Healthcare technology is one of the fastest-growing sectors in the economy," explained Monica Chang, the Andreessen Horowitz partner, who led our investment. "But most companies in this space are optimizing around the edges. Jade Technologies is rebuilding fundamental systems, which is why we believe this company will dominate the market over the next decade." The funding round attracted additional investors, including Google Ventures, Johnson & Johnson Innovation, and Kaiser Permanente's investment arm. Having healthcare delivery organizations invest directly in our technology validated that we weren't just building software. We were creating tools that healthcare providers considered essential for their future operations. My personal equity stake in the company was now worth over $15 million, making me financially independent at a level one couldn't have conceived during my marriage. But more importantly, the wealth was self-generated through intellectual contribution rather than financial dependency on someone else's success. The most satisfying moment of external validation came when the Healthcare Information Management Systems Society invited me to deliver their annual innovation lecture at their Las Vegas conference. HIMSS was the largest gathering of healthcare IT professionals in the world, attracting over 40,000 attendees from every major hospital system, technology company, and government agency involved in healthcare delivery. Ladies and gentlemen, the conference moderator announced to the packed auditorium, please welcome Jessica Chen, founder and CEO of Jade Technologies, to discuss the future of healthcare intelligence, how data integration will transform patient care. Walking onto that stage, I was representing not just my company, but a vision of healthcare delivery that prioritized patient outcomes over institutional convenience. The audience included chief information officers from every major hospital system, technology executives from companies like Epic and Cerner, and government officials responsible for healthcare policy implementation. 5 years ago, healthcare data integration was considered a technical challenge. I began looking out at an audience that included some of the most influential people in American healthcare. Today, we understand that it's actually a patient safety issue. Every minute that medical information takes to reach the right provider is a minute that could determine patient outcomes. The response was unprecedented. Standing ovation. Requests for immediate implementation timelines. 3 major hospital systems approached me during the networking reception to discuss enterprise-wide platform adoption. This isn't just software optimization, said Dr. Patricia Williams, Chief Medical Officer at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. You're describing a transformation in how we practice medicine. Our board has already approved budget allocation for your platform implementation. That HIMSS presentation generated $23 million in new contracts within 6 months. But more importantly, it established me as a thought leader whose opinions shaped industry direction rather than someone seeking approval for her ideas. The academic recognition was equally meaningful. Stanford University invited me to join their Digital Health Advisory Board, where I worked alongside professors, Nobel laureates, and leaders from organizations like the FDA and CDC to guide research priorities for the next generation of healthcare technology. Your combination of technical expertise and real-world implementation experience is exactly what academic healthcare research needs, explained Dr. Robert Kim, Stanford's Director of Digital Health Innovation. Too often, university research develops solutions that work in laboratories but fail in actual healthcare environments. Your perspective ensures that our research addresses problems that actually matter to patient care. The advisory board work involved reviewing research proposals, mentoring graduate students, and helping design studies that would validate new approaches to healthcare delivery. Being trusted with these responsibilities by one of the world's most prestigious universities was validation that my expertise had achieved academic credibility. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the patients themselves. Healthcare organizations that implemented our platforms began sharing outcome data that demonstrated measurable improvements in patient care quality. Faster diagnoses, fewer medical errors, more personalized treatment plans, reduced hospital readmission rates. The metrics proved that our technology wasn't just making healthcare more efficient, it was making it better. Your platform helped save my daughter's life, wrote Margaret Thompson, a mother from Phoenix whose daughter had been treated at Southwest Medical Systems. The doctors were able to access her complete medical history instantly when she came to the emergency room, and that information allowed them to diagnose a rare condition that might have been missed otherwise. Letters like Margaret's arrived weekly, each one representing a real person whose healthcare experience had been improved by technology I'd developed. These weren't abstract business metrics. They were human stories that proved intellectual work could have profound humanitarian impact. The recognition culminated when Time magazine included me in their Time 100 Next list of emerging leaders who were shaping the future of their industries. The magazine's healthcare section featured a full-page profile titled The Woman Revolutionizing Medical Data, complete with a professional photo shoot at Jade Technologies' expanded Phoenix headquarters. Chen represents a new generation of healthcare innovators who understand that technology's greatest value isn't replacing human expertise but enhancing it, the Time profile concluded. Her platforms don't automate medical decision-making, they provide doctors with better information faster, allowing human intelligence to operate more effectively. Reading that Time profile, I realized that the recognition had transcended professional achievement. I had become someone whose work mattered to society, whose innovations improved lives, whose expertise influenced policy that affected millions of people. The woman Daniel had tried to diminish was now being celebrated by the most prestigious institutions in technology, healthcare, and business. The recognition wasn't just professional validation. It was proof that their assessment of my capabilities had been not just wrong, but absurdly, catastrophically wrong. Every award, every speaking invitation, every media profile was evidence that the person they'd tried to break had been hiding capabilities they could never have imagined. The recognition felt like vindication, but more importantly, it felt like freedom. The freedom to be exactly as ambitious, intelligent, and successful as I was capable of becoming. Standing in my Phoenix office, surrounded by awards from MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and Time magazine, I understood something profound about the nature of potential. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't require approval. It only requires the space to grow and the courage to claim it. Daniel's family had spent years trying to convince me that I was lucky to be tolerated. The world's most prestigious institutions were now competing to celebrate me. The contrast was so complete that it felt like comparing two different species rather than two different perspectives on the same person. The recognition was overwhelming, but it was also just the beginning. Jade Technologies was expanding internationally, with pilot programs launching in Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. My speaking calendar was booked 18 months in advance. 3 major publishers were competing to secure rights for a book about healthcare innovation that I was writing. But perhaps most importantly, I was no longer the woman who needed external validation to understand her own worth. The recognition was gratifying, but it was confirmation rather than revelation. I already knew what I was capable of accomplishing. The world was simply catching up to what I'd discovered about myself when I finally escaped people who had been systematically preventing that discovery. The next phase of the story would prove that recognition was just the foundation for something even more significant. The power to change entire systems, and the confidence to use that power without asking anyone's permission. 2 years and 8 months after that stormy night at the Dallas bus terminal, I found myself in a situation that would have been impossible to imagine during my marriage to Daniel. I was flying back to Texas, not as a refugee fleeing a toxic situation, but as the keynote speaker for the Southwest Regional Healthcare Innovation Conference in Austin, commanding a speaking fee of $75,000 for a single presentation. The private jet that carried me across the familiar landscape of Texas belonged to MedTech Dynamics, one of Jade Technologies' largest enterprise clients. Dr. Amanda Foster, their chief executive officer, had insisted on providing transportation after learning that commercial flights would require me to overnight in Dallas, a city I hadn't set foot in since my departure. Jessica, your platform has saved our organization over $12 million in operational efficiency improvements, Dr. Foster explained as we flew over the eastern New Mexico desert. The least we can do is ensure your travel arrangements reflect the value you've provided. Flying over Texas in a corporate jet, heading to address an audience of 2,500 healthcare executives about innovations that were reshaping medical delivery nationwide, I reflected on how completely my relationship with this state had transformed. I was no longer someone escaping Texas. I was someone whose expertise was so valued that Texas organizations competed to secure my time and attention. The Austin conference was scheduled for Thursday and Friday, but an unexpected development had extended my Texas visit. On Wednesday morning, while reviewing my presentation materials in my Four Seasons suite, I received a call that would force me to confront the past I thought I'd permanently left behind. Ms. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Dallas Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The voice on my phone was professional but serious. We need to speak with you about a case involving identity theft and financial fraud. Your former husband Daniel Sullivan has been arrested, and we believe you may be a victim in this investigation. The irony was staggering. Daniel, who had once lectured me about gratitude and responsibility, was now facing criminal charges for forging signatures and fraudulent business practices. The dental practice that his family had held up as evidence of his success had collapsed in a scandal involving insurance fraud, patient billing irregularities, and improper financial reporting. Dr. Sullivan has been using your identity to secure business loans and credit lines for the past 18 months, Detective Martinez explained during our phone conversation. We've identified at least $340,000 in fraudulent transactions that were processed using forged documentation bearing your signature. The financial crimes investigation revealed the complete scope of Daniel's desperation after my departure. Without my income to subsidize his failing practice, he had resorted to increasingly desperate measures to maintain the illusion of success: forged insurance claims, padded billing statements, and, ultimately, identity theft, using my personal information that he'd retained from our marriage. We need you to review the evidence and provide testimony for the prosecution, Detective Martinez continued. Given your current residence in Arizona, we can arrange for depositions via video conference, but the district attorney would prefer in-person testimony if possible. The legal proceedings would require me to return to Dallas for the first time since my escape. The woman who had fled in humiliation would be returning as a witness in a criminal case against the man who had tried to break her spirit. Thursday's conference presentation in Austin proceeded flawlessly. Standing before 2,500 healthcare executives at the Austin Convention Center, I presented research showing how Jade Technologies platforms had improved patient outcomes across 127 healthcare systems in 23 states. The audience included chief medical officers from every major hospital system in Texas, many of whom had worked with Daniel during his dental career. The future of healthcare delivery requires us to think beyond individual institutions, I explained, advancing through slides showing network-wide improvements in diagnostic accuracy and treatment efficiency. Integrated data platforms allow us to learn from every patient interaction and apply those insights to improve care for every subsequent patient. The response was overwhelming. Standing ovation. Immediate requests for implementation consultations. 3 Texas hospital systems committed to enterprise-wide platform adoption before the conference concluded. But the most significant moment came during the post-presentation networking reception, when Dr. Michael Chen, no relation, Chief Medical Officer at Dallas Presbyterian Hospital, approached me with information that connected my professional success to Daniel's criminal downfall. Ms. Chen, I need to tell you something, Dr. Chen said quietly, leading me to a corner of the reception hall. I worked with your former husband several years ago on a community dental health initiative. When his practice started having problems, he approached me about potential partnerships with our hospital system. Dr. Chen's revelation was more disturbing than I'd expected. Daniel had been using my professional reputation and success to leverage business opportunities, claiming that his wife's technology consulting work gave him insights into healthcare innovation that other dental practitioners lacked. He presented himself as having inside knowledge of healthcare IT trends, Dr. Chen continued. He claimed his wife worked with major technology companies and that he could help us understand emerging innovations. Several colleagues were impressed by his apparent access to cutting-edge healthcare technology insights. The fraudulent scheme was more sophisticated than simple identity theft. Daniel had been trading on my professional accomplishments while simultaneously working to undermine my confidence and independence. He had been monetizing my success while convincing me that I had no value. When we heard about the criminal charges, several of us realized that the technology insights he'd claimed to possess were probably information he'd stolen from you, Dr. Chen concluded. I wanted you to know that the Dallas medical community is horrified by what he did and deeply impressed by what you've accomplished independently. Friday morning brought the most surreal development yet. I was preparing to fly back to Phoenix when my assistant, Maria Gonzalez, called with urgent news about an unexpected situation developing in Dallas. Jessica, there's been a development with the legal case, Maria said, her voice carrying both excitement and disbelief. The detective investigating your former husband's fraud case wants to meet with you today. But there's something else. Daniel's construction company is liquidating assets, and they're auctioning equipment at a site in North Dallas. The local news is covering it as part of the fraud investigation story. The construction site liquidation was taking place at a facility Daniel had been leasing for equipment storage, the same type of industrial location where he'd once felt powerful enough to abandon me in a storm. The irony was too perfect to ignore. Maria, change my flight departure to this evening, I decided. I want to see this liquidation auction myself. The drive from Austin to Dallas felt like traveling through time zones of my own life. Every mile brought me closer to confronting not just Daniel, but the woman I'd been when I lived in his world. The rental car, a Tesla Model S that Jade Technologies leased for executive travel, felt like armor against the memories of driving through Texas with someone who treated my presence as an inconvenience. The auction site was exactly what I'd expected, a dusty industrial lot filled with dental equipment, office furniture, and the remnants of a business that had collapsed under the weight of its owner's pride and criminal behavior. Local news trucks surrounded the perimeter, documenting the fall of a man who had once been featured in Dallas Business Journal as an emerging entrepreneur in healthcare delivery. I parked across the street and watched the proceedings through designer sunglasses, observing from the air-conditioned comfort of a car worth more than Daniel's annual income during our marriage. The woman who had once been abandoned in a storm was now watching her former husband's professional life being sold at public auction. That's when I saw him. Daniel stood near a cluster of outdated dental equipment, wearing a wrinkled shirt and looking older than his 33 years. The confident man who had once lectured me about gratitude and responsibility had been replaced by someone who moved with the uncertainty of repeated failure and impending legal consequences. He was talking animatedly with a heavy-set man in coveralls who was examining a dental x-ray machine with obvious skepticism. Even from a distance, I could see Daniel's desperation as he tried to convince potential buyers that his equipment was worth more than the liquidation prices suggested. The contrast was staggering. 2 years and 8 months earlier, Daniel had possessed enough confidence in his superiority to abandon me in a storm as punishment for insufficiently appreciating his provision. Now he was begging strangers to pay fair prices for equipment that represented the collapsed remains of his professional identity. I could have driven away without engaging, satisfied with observing his downfall from a distance. But something compelled me to complete the circle that had begun on that stormy night. I wanted Daniel to see who I had become when I was no longer being systematically diminished by his family's psychological warfare. I stepped out of the Tesla and walked across the street toward the auction area. My appearance was calculated to demonstrate exactly how wrong his family's assessment of my potential had been. Designer business suit from a Phoenix boutique. Jewelry that cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. Professional confidence that came from knowing I was respected by institutions that would never acknowledge someone like him. The moment Daniel saw me, his face went through a sequence of expressions I'd never witnessed before. Confusion, recognition, disbelief, and something that looked like fear. "Jessica," he said, his voice carrying none of the authority he'd once used to control me. "What are you doing here?" "Watching the auction," I replied calmly. Looking around at the scattered equipment that represented the collapse of everything he'd once claimed made him superior to me. "I heard about your legal troubles. The detective said you'd been using my identity for fraudulent business loans." Daniel's face flushed red, but whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. "Look, that was just temporary borrowing. I was going to pay everything back once the practice was over." Temporary borrowing. He was still lying, still trying to minimize the scope of his criminal behavior, still expecting me to accept his explanations without question. "Daniel, you forged my signature on $340,000 worth of fraudulent documents," I said, loud enough for nearby auction attendees to hear. "That's not borrowing, that's identity theft and criminal fraud." The man in coveralls, who had been examining the x-ray machine, looked up with interest, clearly recognizing that he was witnessing personal drama that was more entertaining than dental equipment appraisal. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," Daniel continued, his voice taking on the whining tone I remembered from our worst arguments. "After you left, everything fell apart. The practice couldn't sustain itself without your income. Without my income." He had finally admitted what I'd known for years, but what his family had spent so much energy denying. My work had been subsidizing his failure while he lectured me about being grateful for his success. "So you decided to commit crimes using my identity," I stated matter-of-factly. "Instead of acknowledging that you needed help, you chose to steal from me even after I was gone." Daniel's response revealed how little he understood about my transformation. "Look, I know you're mad about that night at the bus station. I was drinking, and I made a mistake. But we can work this out. You obviously did well for yourself after you left. Maybe we could find a way to get back together and combine our resources." The suggestion was so absurd that I almost laughed. The man who had abandoned me in a storm, whose family had orchestrated a campaign to break my spirit, who had committed felonies using my identity, was suggesting that we resume our marriage so he could access my success. "Daniel, I'm not mad about that night," I said, enjoying the confusion that spread across his face. "That night was the best thing that ever happened to me." "What do you mean?" "I mean that storm gave me the excuse I needed to disappear completely. I'd been planning my escape for months, but I needed the right moment to make it look like your fault rather than my choice. You handed me that moment perfectly." The color drained from Daniel's face as he began to understand that what he'd intended as punishment had actually been liberation. "You plan to leave?" "I found the emails, Daniel. Your family's conspiracy to break my spirit. The wedding group chat where they recruited strangers to psychologically manipulate me. The financial sabotage. The professional interference. The plans to have me institutionalized if I didn't surrender my career." Daniel's mouth opened and closed without sound, like someone trying to breathe underwater. "I documented everything," I continued, pulling out my phone to show him the Forbes article about Jade Technologies that had been published the previous month. "While you and your family were planning my destruction, I was building something you could never understand." Daniel stared at the phone screen, reading the headline, "How Jessica Chen Built a $47 million Healthcare Technology Company by Revolutionizing Medical Data Integration." "That's impossible," he whispered. "You were just doing computer hobbies." Computer hobbies, I repeated, savoring the phrase that had once made me question my own value. Those hobbies are now saving lives and reshaping healthcare delivery across 23 states. Those hobbies attracted $8.5 million in venture capital funding and partnerships with IBM, the World Health Organization, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. I showed him additional articles on my phone: the MIT Technology Innovation Award, the Time Magazine profile, the Harvard Business Review cover story, the American Medical Association Advisory Council appointment. While you were forging my signature to commit fraud, I said, advancing through the media coverage that documented my success, I was being recognized by the most prestigious institutions in technology and healthcare for innovations that are literally changing how medicine is practiced. Daniel's legs seemed to give out slightly, and he leaned against the X-ray machine for support. The man who had once possessed enough confidence to lecture me about my responsibilities was now confronting evidence that his victim had become more successful than he could ever imagine. I don't understand, he said weakly. You never did, I replied. You saw my potential as a threat to your ego, instead of recognizing it as an asset to our partnership. You chose to diminish me rather than celebrate me. You decided to break me rather than support me. The auction around us had essentially stopped as other attendees became interested in our conversation. Several people had recognized me from the healthcare conference coverage and were listening with obvious fascination to this real-time drama. The night you left me at that bus terminal, I continued, you thought you were teaching me humility. Instead, you were setting me free to become everything I was capable of being when I wasn't being systematically undermined by people who claimed to love me. Daniel's response was predictable. But we were married. We were supposed to be a team. Teams don't sabotage each other's success, I said. Teams don't recruit family members to psychologically manipulate their partners. Teams don't forge signatures to commit identity theft when things get difficult. I gestured toward the auction equipment surrounding us. This is what happens when pride and incompetence meet reality. You chose to steal from me rather than admit you needed me. You chose criminal behavior rather than acknowledging that your assessment of my capabilities was completely wrong. The final blow came when my phone rang with a call from Dr. Amanda Foster at MedTech Dynamics. I answered it on speaker, not caring that Daniel could hear every word. Jessica, I hope I'm not interrupting, Dr. Foster's voice carried through the auction lot. But I wanted to confirm that our board approved the expanded partnership we discussed. The additional $15 million contract should be finalized by Monday. That's wonderful news, Amanda, I replied, watching Daniel's face as he processed that I was casually discussing business deals worth more than his entire lifetime earnings. I'll have my legal team review the terms this weekend. Perfect. Also, European expansion is moving faster than expected. The London and Berlin implementations are both ahead of schedule. You should be very proud of what you've built. After ending the call, I looked at Daniel with something approaching pity. That was just one client, Daniel. Jade Technologies now works with 127 healthcare systems across 3 countries. We employ 43 people and generate annual revenue approaching $18 million. Daniel stood speechless, still leaning against the dental equipment that represented the ruins of his professional life. The woman you tried to break, I said, is now influencing healthcare policy at the national level. The computer hobbies you dismissed are now improving patient outcomes for millions of people. The income you tried to control now makes me financially independent at levels you'll never achieve. I pulled out my business card, thick, elegant cardstock that identified me as Jessica Chen, Chief Executive Officer, Jade Technologies, alongside logos indicating partnerships with IBM, Stanford University, and the American Medical Association. This is who I became when I stopped trying to be small enough to fit into the life you designed for me, I said, handing him the card. This is what happens when potential meets opportunity instead of systematic suppression. Daniel took the card with trembling hands, staring at it as if it were written in a foreign language. I need to ask you something, I said, genuinely curious about his response. Did you ever wonder what I might have accomplished if you and your family had supported my ambitions instead of trying to destroy them? Daniel looked up from the business card, his eyes reflecting a man who was finally understanding the scope of his miscalculation. Jessica, Don't answer, I interrupted. It doesn't matter anymore. You made your choice when you decided I was the problem, rather than recognizing that you were threatened by my success. You chose to see my potential as competition rather than celebration. I gestured toward my Tesla, visible across the street. I have a flight to catch. I'm speaking at the World Health Organization next week about global healthcare data standardization. After that, I'm testifying before Congress about technology policies that will affect how healthcare is delivered for the next decade. The contrast was complete. Daniel's world had shrunk to a liquidation auction in a dusty lot, while mine had expanded to international influence and congressional testimony. "The storm you put me through," I said, beginning to walk toward my car, "taught me exactly how strong I really was. Thank you for that lesson." As I reached the Tesla, I turned back for one final observation. "Daniel, you were right about one thing. That night did teach me about humility. It taught me to be humble about how much I'm capable of accomplishing when I'm not being held back by people who need me to be smaller than I am." The drive back to Austin gave me time to process the confrontation that had closed a chapter I thought was already finished. Seeing Daniel at that auction hadn't provided the satisfaction I might have expected. Instead, it had confirmed something more important. I had moved so far beyond his understanding that his opinion of me was no longer relevant to my sense of self-worth. The private jet that carried me back to Phoenix that evening felt like a bridge between two different universes. Behind me was the world where Jessica Chen Sullivan had once apologized for having career ambitions. Ahead was the world where Jessica Chen was reshaping entire industries and influencing policy that affected millions of lives. As we flew west toward home, I thought about the woman who had stood in that bus terminal 2 years and 8 months earlier, clutching a waterproof phone and waiting for her rescue. She could never have imagined that her lowest moment would become the foundation for achievements that exceeded her wildest ambitions. The storm had passed. The woman who emerged from it was stronger, more successful, and more authentic than anyone who tried to break her could have predicted. And she was just getting started. Landing in Phoenix at midnight, I was met by Maria Gonzalez with updates on next week's congressional testimony, 3 new contract proposals, and a message from the Nobel Committee expressing interest in my healthcare innovation research. The woman Daniel had abandoned in a storm was now being courted by institutions that would never acknowledge his existence. The transformation was complete, but the story was still being written, and this time I was the only author. 3 weeks after the auction confrontation, the ripple effects of Daniel's criminal case began creating consequences I hadn't anticipated. The Dallas Morning News published an investigative series titled "The Fall of a Dental Empire: How Professional Fraud Destroyed a Dallas Practice," which detailed not only Daniel's crimes, but also the systematic campaign his family had waged against my career. The newspaper had obtained court documents that included some of the emails and group chat messages I discovered years earlier. Jennifer Walsh, the private investigator who had helped me document their conspiracy, had been subpoenaed to provide evidence for the prosecution's case. Her testimony revealed the full scope of their coordinated harassment campaign. "This wasn't domestic dysfunction," Jennifer was quoted in the newspaper article. "This was organized psychological warfare designed to break a successful woman's spirit and force her into financial dependence." The documentation shows a level of premeditation that goes far beyond family disagreement. The public exposure triggered responses I hadn't expected from the Dallas business community. 3 prominent women entrepreneurs reached out to share their own stories of family sabotage and professional undermining. Dr. Rachel Torres, who had built a successful medical device company, invited me to coffee during my next Dallas visit. "Reading about your situation felt like reading my own story," Dr. Torres said when we met at a downtown Dallas cafe. "My ex-husband's family used identical tactics to try to break my confidence and force me to abandon my business. The coordination, the psychological manipulation, the financial sabotage, it's like they all read from the same playbook." These conversations revealed that Daniel's family's tactics weren't unique. There was an entire underground network of families who saw successful women as threats to their traditional worldview and who used sophisticated manipulation techniques to force compliance with their expectations. "We're starting a support network," explained Lisa Martinez, a tech entrepreneur who had survived similar family harassment. "Professional women who've escaped coordinated campaigns designed to break their independence. We want to help others recognize these patterns before they cause lasting damage." The Dallas Women's Professional Alliance invited me to speak at their annual conference about recognizing and surviving family sabotage of professional success. The speaking request represented a full-circle moment. I would be returning to Dallas not as someone fleeing abuse, but as someone educating others about overcoming it. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings against Daniel intensified in ways that revealed the true extent of his criminal behavior. Federal investigators discovered that his identity theft scheme had targeted not just me, but 3 other former patients whose personal information he'd used to secure fraudulent loans. Mr. Sullivan's crimes represent a pattern of systematic fraud that extends far beyond the original charges. announced District Attorney Monica Ramirez during a press conference that was covered by local television news. We're now investigating potential violations of federal healthcare fraud statutes and HIPAA privacy regulations. The expanded investigation revealed that Daniel had been billing insurance companies for procedures he'd never performed, creating false patient records to justify unnecessary treatments, and selling patient contact information to marketing companies without consent. The dental practice that Patricia Sullivan had held up as evidence of her son's success had actually been a criminal enterprise disguised as healthcare delivery. Most shocking was the discovery that Daniel had been prescribing unnecessary opioid medications to generate additional insurance revenue, contributing to addiction problems among his patients. The Texas State Board of Dental Examiners revoked his license permanently and referred his case to federal prosecutors for potential criminal charges under the Controlled Substances Act. Dr. Sullivan's actions represent the worst possible violations of patient trust and medical ethics, said Dr. William Chen, chairman of the state board. His behavior endangers not only individual patients but public confidence in dental healthcare delivery. The criminal case attracted attention from healthcare fraud investigators nationwide, who recognized patterns that suggested Daniel's techniques weren't self-developed, but learned from organized networks of medical professionals who were gaming insurance systems for personal profit. While Daniel's world collapsed in increasingly spectacular fashion, my professional trajectory continued accelerating beyond anything I could have projected. The congressional testimony about healthcare technology policy led to an invitation to join the President's Council on Healthcare Innovation, a position that involved advising the White House on technology policies affecting medical delivery nationwide. Ms. Chen's expertise in healthcare data integration represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need to address America's healthcare challenges, said Dr. Patricia Kim, the President's Chief Health Technology Advisor, during the announcement of my appointment. Her platforms have demonstrated measurable improvements in patient outcomes while reducing costs. That's the combination of innovation and results that can transform our entire healthcare system. The White House appointment required security clearance investigations that brought additional scrutiny to Daniel's criminal case. Federal investigators wanted to ensure that my ex-husband's fraudulent activities didn't create any conflicts of interest for someone advising on national healthcare policy. The investigation actually strengthens Ms. Chen's credibility, explained Special Agent David Rodriguez, who conducted my security clearance review. She's the victim of identity theft by someone who was defrauding healthcare systems. Her experience provides valuable insights into vulnerabilities that criminals exploit. The security clearance process also revealed information about Daniel's family that I hadn't known during our marriage. Patricia Sullivan had been investigated by the IRS for tax evasion related to unreported rental income from properties she owned. Amanda Sullivan had been sued twice for employment discrimination at the marketing firm where she worked. Marcus Thompson had been sanctioned by the Texas Real Estate Commission for misrepresenting property values to clients. Your former in-laws weren't just manipulative, Agent Rodriguez explained during our final clearance interview. They were a family of people who used deception and fraud as standard operating procedures. Their campaign against you fits a pattern of behavior that extends far beyond personal relationships. This information helped me understand that their treatment of me hadn't been personal weakness on their part. It had been consistent with how they approached every aspect of their lives. They were fundamentally dishonest people who saw other people as obstacles to be managed, rather than individuals to be respected. The White House appointment also opened doors to international opportunities that elevated my work beyond American healthcare systems. The European Union invited me to consult on healthcare data standardization across member countries, recognizing that the platforms I developed for American hospitals could be adapted to improve medical delivery throughout Europe. The United States has developed some of the most innovative healthcare technology solutions in the world, said Dr. Hans Muller, director of the EU's Digital Health Initiative, during our first planning meeting in Brussels. Ms. Chen's integration platforms represent breakthrough thinking that could revolutionize how European healthcare systems share patient information across national borders. The EU consultation work required monthly trips to Brussels, Geneva, and various European capitals, where I participated in policy discussions that would determine how 500 million Europeans received medical care. The responsibility was enormous but exhilarating. Decisions we made would affect healthcare delivery for entire populations. The international work also led to academic opportunities that fulfilled ambitions I'd never had space to develop during my marriage. Cambridge University invited me to establish a new research center focused on global healthcare technology innovation. with funding from the British government and pharmaceutical companies interested in implementing my integration methodologies. The Cambridge Centre for Healthcare Intelligence will become the world's leading institution for research into medical data optimization, announced Dr. Sarah Chen, Cambridge's Vice Chancellor for Technology Innovation, during the centre's launch ceremony. Ms. Chen's leadership will ensure that British universities remain at the forefront of healthcare technology development. Establishing the Cambridge Centre required relocating to England for 6 months each year, splitting my time between Phoenix operations and European research initiatives. The arrangement felt like the natural evolution of someone whose expertise had transcended national boundaries, and whose innovations were reshaping healthcare delivery globally. The most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source: the patients whose lives had been improved by healthcare systems using Jade Technologies platforms. The American Medical Association began collecting outcome data that demonstrated measurable improvements in patient care quality across organizations that had implemented our integration solutions. Diagnostic accuracy has improved by an average of 31% across hospitals using Ms. Chen's platforms, reported Dr. Lisa Wang, the AMA's Director of Quality Improvement, during a medical conference in Chicago. More importantly, patient satisfaction scores have increased by 28% because medical information is available faster and treatment decisions are made more efficiently. These weren't abstract business metrics. They were human stories that proved intellectual work could have profound humanitarian impact. Hospital administrators began sharing specific cases where our platforms had enabled life-saving diagnoses that might have been missed under traditional information management systems. A 34-year-old mother came to our emergency room with symptoms that could have indicated dozens of different conditions, wrote Dr. Michael Torres from Southwest Medical Systems in a case study published by the Journal of Healthcare Innovation. Our platform instantly accessed her complete medical history from 3 different healthcare systems, revealing a rare genetic condition that required immediate treatment. Without that integrated information, we might have missed the diagnosis until it was too late. Stories like this arrived weekly, each one representing a real person whose healthcare experience had been improved by technology I'd developed while Daniel's family was dismissing my work as computer hobbies. The humanitarian impact provided satisfaction that transcended professional recognition or financial success. The platform's success also attracted acquisition interest from technology giants who recognized the scaling potential of integrated healthcare data management. Microsoft offered $340 million to acquire Jade Technologies and integrate our platforms into their Azure cloud computing infrastructure. Healthcare represents the fastest-growing sector in cloud computing, explained Jennifer Liu, Microsoft's Director of Healthcare Strategy, during acquisition discussions. Your integration methodologies could become the standard for how medical information is managed globally. This isn't just a business acquisition, it's an investment in the future of healthcare delivery. The acquisition negotiations provided another opportunity to measure how completely my life had transformed. The $340 million Microsoft was offering for my company exceeded the combined lifetime earnings of Daniel, his family, and everyone who had participated in their campaign to break my spirit. More satisfying than the financial validation was the recognition that my work had created value that transcended individual success. The technology platforms would continue improving healthcare delivery long after I moved on to other challenges, creating a legacy of humanitarian impact that no amount of family manipulation could have prevented. As I sat in Microsoft's Seattle headquarters, negotiating terms that would make me one of the most successful healthcare technology entrepreneurs in American history, I thought about the woman who had once questioned her own judgment because other people told her she was insufficient. That woman was gone forever, replaced by someone who understood exactly how much she was capable of accomplishing when she wasn't being systematically diminished by people who claimed to love her. The transformation was complete, but it was also just the beginning. The acquisition would provide resources to expand healthcare technology innovation globally, creating platforms that could improve medical delivery for billions of people. And it had all started with a storm, a bus terminal, and the courage to choose freedom over false security. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't revenge at all. It was living so successfully that your former oppressors became completely irrelevant to your story. Daniel and his family had tried to write the ending of my life. Instead, they had provided the opening chapter of something far more significant than they could ever have imagined. The Microsoft acquisition negotiations stretched over 4 months, during which time Jade Technologies continued expanding at a pace that surprised even our most optimistic projections. The announcement of potential acquisition by a technology giant triggered a feeding frenzy among healthcare organizations eager to implement our platforms before pricing structures changed under new ownership. We're experiencing what economists call acquisition acceleration, explained Dr. Robert Kim, our Chief Strategy Officer, during a board meeting in Phoenix. Organizations that were planning gradual implementation are now requesting enterprise-wide deployment within 6 months. Our pipeline has grown from $23 million to $67 million in committed contracts. The acceleration created operational challenges that required rapid scaling of our workforce and infrastructure. We hired 34 additional employees in 3 months, opened satellite offices in Boston and London, and established partnerships with implementation consulting firms in 12 countries. Managing hypergrowth while maintaining the quality standards that had built our reputation required leadership skills I'd never had the opportunity to develop during my marriage. Daniel had controlled all major decisions in our household, dismissing my input as unnecessarily complicated. Now I was making strategic choices that affected hundreds of employees and millions of patients worldwide. The leadership challenges were particularly intense because our growth attracted attention from competitors who had initially dismissed our integration methodologies as impossible to scale. Epic Systems, the largest healthcare software company in America, began developing competing platforms that attempted to replicate our success. "Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery," said Catherine Walsh, my business attorney, during a strategy session about competitive responses. "But it's also validation that you've created something genuinely revolutionary. When industry leaders start copying your innovations, you know you've fundamentally changed the market." The competitive pressure actually strengthened our position by forcing us to accelerate innovation beyond what competitors could replicate. Our research and development team, led by Dr. Sarah Kim, began developing artificial intelligence components that would make our platforms not just integrate existing data, but predict healthcare needs before they became critical. Predictive healthcare analytics represents the next evolution of medical delivery, Dr. Kim explained during a presentation to our board of advisors. Instead of reacting to patient health crises, our platforms will identify risk patterns early enough to prevent those crises from occurring. The AI development work attracted partnerships with IBM's Watson Health Division, Google's DeepMind Health Research Team, and the National Institutes of Health's Precision Medicine Initiative. These collaborations positioned J Technologies not just as a healthcare data company, but as a leader in the emerging field of predictive medical intelligence. The NIH partnership was particularly meaningful because it connected my work to government research initiatives aimed at eliminating health disparities across different populations. Our platforms were being adapted to identify why certain communities experienced worse health outcomes and develop targeted interventions to address those inequities. "Healthcare equality isn't just a moral imperative," explained Dr. Monica Rodriguez, director of the NIH's Health Equity Research Center, during our first collaborative planning meeting. "It's an economic necessity." Ms. Chen's platforms provide the data integration tools we need to understand why health outcomes vary so dramatically across different communities. The health equity work required developing new analytical frameworks that could process demographic, socioeconomic, and geographic data alongside traditional medical information. The complexity was staggering, but the potential impact was enormous. We were creating tools that could help eliminate some of the most persistent inequalities in American society. This work also brought me into contact with international development organizations interested in adapting our technologies for healthcare systems in developing countries. The World Bank invited me to consult on healthcare infrastructure projects in sub-Saharan Africa, where lack of integrated medical information was preventing effective disease prevention and treatment programs. "African healthcare systems face unique challenges," explained Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the World Bank's Director of Global Health Development, during our initial consultation in Washington. Limited infrastructure, multiple languages, diverse cultural practices, but also opportunities to implement next-generation technologies without being constrained by legacy systems. The African healthcare projects required developing platforms that could operate reliably with intermittent internet connectivity, multiple local languages, and varying levels of technological sophistication among healthcare workers. The technical challenges were complex, but the humanitarian potential was extraordinary. Our first pilot program launched in Kenya, where we partnered with the Ministry of Health to create integrated patient tracking systems across rural health clinics. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. Diagnostic accuracy improved by 45%, treatment completion rates increased by 38%, and vaccine coverage expanded to previously unreached populations. "This technology isn't just improving healthcare delivery," said Dr. James Mwangi, Kenya's Minister of Health, during the pilot program evaluation. It's demonstrating that African countries can be at the forefront of global healthcare innovation, rather than just recipients of outdated technologies from developed nations. The Kenyan success attracted attention from healthcare ministries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The Pan-African Health Alliance invited me to address their annual conference in Lagos, Nigeria, where I presented our integration methodologies to health ministers from 34 countries. Standing before that audience, discussing how technology developed in Phoenix could improve healthcare delivery for over 800 million Africans, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The woman Daniel had tried to confine to domestic support roles was now influencing healthcare policy for entire continents. The international expansion also created opportunities for social impact that transcended traditional business metrics. The United Nations invited me to join their Sustainable Development Goals Technology Advisory Council, where I worked with other innovators to address global challenges through technological solutions. Healthcare access represents one of the most critical barriers to human development, explained Dr. Sarah Johnson, the UN's Director of Technology Innovation, during our first council meeting in New York. Your platforms demonstrate how properly designed technology can democratize access to quality medical care, regardless of geographic or economic constraints. The UN work involved developing frameworks for implementing healthcare technology in post-conflict societies, refugee camps, and other humanitarian crisis situations. The technical requirements were extreme. Systems that could operate without reliable electricity, process information in dozens of languages, and maintain patient privacy under challenging security conditions. But the most profound recognition came from an unexpected source. The Nobel Committee announced that they were considering creating a new category for healthcare technology innovation, recognizing individuals whose technological contributions had measurably improved global health outcomes. The traditional Nobel Prize categories were established when medical advancement primarily occurred through laboratory research, explained Dr. Eric Sorensen, Secretary of the Nobel Foundation, during a confidential consultation meeting in Stockholm. Today's most significant healthcare breakthroughs often involve information technology and systems integration. We're exploring whether to recognize these contributions through a new award category. While the Nobel Committee deliberated, other prestigious institutions began competing to recognize my contributions to healthcare technology innovation. The MacArthur Foundation awarded me their Genius Grant for developing breakthrough approaches to healthcare information management that are transforming medical delivery globally. Ms. Chen represents the emergence of a new type of innovator, the MacArthur Foundation announced in their award citation. Someone who combines deep technical expertise with profound understanding of healthcare delivery challenges. Her work demonstrates how individual innovation can create systemic change that improves lives at scale. The MacArthur Grant provided $625,000 over 5 years, with no restrictions on how the funding could be used. I decided to establish the Chen Foundation for Healthcare Innovation, focused on supporting other entrepreneurs developing technology solutions for global health challenges. Too many brilliant innovators lack the resources to transform their ideas into scalable solutions, I explained during the foundation's launch ceremony at Stanford University. This foundation will provide the kind of support I wish I'd had when I was building Jade Technologies for my home office in Phoenix. The foundation's first initiatives included a fellowship program for women entrepreneurs developing healthcare technologies, an accelerator for innovations addressing health disparities, and a research grant program for university-based healthcare technology projects. Within 6 months, the Chen Foundation had received over 400 applications from innovators in 23 countries, each proposing technological solutions to healthcare challenges ranging from tropical disease prevention to mental health support in rural communities. This foundation is funding the next generation of healthcare innovation, said Dr. Robert Chen from MIT during the first fellowship award ceremony. These aren't just business ventures. They're humanitarian missions that happen to use technology as their delivery mechanism. Meanwhile, the Microsoft acquisition negotiations reached their final stages with terms that exceeded even our most optimistic projections. The final offer was $420 million, with additional performance bonuses that could reach $200 million based on platform adoption rates over the following 5 years. This isn't just the largest healthcare technology acquisition in Microsoft's history, explained Satya Nadella, Microsoft's CEO, during the final negotiation meeting. It's an investment in transforming how technology companies think about healthcare delivery. Your platforms don't just organize information, they improve human lives in measurable ways. The acquisition terms included provisions ensuring that our humanitarian initiatives would continue under Microsoft's ownership, with dedicated funding for expanding healthcare technology access in developing countries. Microsoft's global infrastructure will allow us to implement these platforms in healthcare systems we could never have reached independently, I explained to our board during the final acquisition vote. This isn't just a financial transaction. It's an opportunity to scale humanitarian impact to unprecedented levels. The board vote was unanimous, but more meaningful was the response from our employees when the acquisition was announced. Rather than anxiety about corporate ownership, there was excitement about the expanded opportunities to improve healthcare delivery globally. Working here has never felt like just a job, said Maria Gonzalez, who had grown from my executive assistant to our director of international operations. It feels like participating in something that matters. This acquisition means we can do even more of that work. The Microsoft acquisition celebration took place at the Phoenix Ritz-Carlton, with employees, clients, investors, and partners gathering to commemorate not just financial success, but the humanitarian impact we'd achieved together. Dr. Michael Torres from Southwest Medical Systems served as the keynote speaker, sharing patient stories that demonstrated the human significance of our technological innovations. 5 years ago, Jessica Chen was unknown outside a small circle of Phoenix healthcare administrators, Dr. Torres said during his presentation. Today, her innovations are improving healthcare delivery for millions of patients worldwide. But the most remarkable aspect of this story isn't the business success. It's the proof that individual vision and determination can create systemic change that saves lives. As the celebration continued around me, I stepped onto the hotel's terrace, overlooking the Phoenix skyline, and reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The city lights stretched toward the mountains where I had first discovered my potential, when I was no longer being systematically diminished by people who claimed to love me. My phone buzzed with a text message from Detective Sarah Martinez. Thought you'd want to know. Daniel Sullivan was sentenced today. 5 years federal prison for healthcare fraud, identity theft, and controlled substance violations. Justice served, 5 years. Daniel would spend the next half-decade in federal prison while I continued expanding healthcare technology innovations across the globe. The contrast was so complete that it felt like comparing two different species rather than two people who had once shared a marriage. But I felt no satisfaction from his downfall, no sense of revenge accomplished. Daniel had become completely irrelevant to my story, a minor character from a previous chapter that had ended long ago. His legal consequences were simply the natural result of choices he'd made after I was no longer part of his life. Oh, the real victory wasn't his failure. It was my success. The real triumph wasn't his imprisonment. It was my freedom to become everything I was capable of being when I wasn't being held back by people who needed me to be smaller than I was. Standing on that terrace, overlooking the city where I'd rebuilt my life from nothing, I understood something profound about the nature of transformation. It doesn't require anyone else's permission. It doesn't need external validation. It only requires the courage to claim your own potential and the determination to protect it from people who would diminish it. The woman who had been abandoned at a bus terminal in a storm had become someone who was improving healthcare delivery for millions of people worldwide. The transformation was complete, but the impact was just beginning. Tomorrow, I will begin the next chapter, leading Microsoft's global healthcare technology division and expanding access to innovative medical technologies for underserved populations worldwide. And it had all started with the simple recognition that I deserved better than what I was accepting, and the courage to choose possibility over security. The storm had passed. The woman who emerged from it had changed the world. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.